Good morning, Canada. We've been talking about some of these different climate issues in relation to, well, a number of things. I was just talking about in relation to migration. A lot of people in the business community talking about climate change issues in relation to finance, and they see a bit of an opportunity there for perhaps a win-win situation. I have a number of questions about the pros and cons of all of this, and Toronto Finance International has released a new report called Capitalizing on Sustainable Finance, a growth opportunity for Toronto's financial sector, and perhaps points for financial sectors all across the country. Jennifer Reynolds joining us now, President and CEO of the Toronto Finance International, to discuss this further. Good morning, Jennifer. Welcome to the program.
Good morning. Happy to be here.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. Capitalizing on Sustainable Finance. That's the title of the report. What does that mean? Unpack that a bit for me.
Yeah, if you think globally about what is happening around sustainable finance, you've had obviously many countries sign on to the Paris Accord and make commitments to keep the climate change below 2 degrees Celsius. And so in order to do that, the reality is that is going to take trillions of dollars globally to make investments in things like infrastructure, in things like cleaner, heavy industry, cleaner transportation, cleaner buildings. And so certainly financial centers around the world are recognizing that this is actually an opportunity, because in order to finance that, we're going to have to mobilize in the financial sector to develop different financial products that, can meet that need. Developing, for instance, a really robust green bond market, things like that, developing climate disclosure, relevant climate disclosure that really provides transparency to the market. So what we sought to do with that report was say, let's look at what's happening around the world. Let's look at what other financial centers are doing, and then look at Toronto and think, what could we do as a financial center, and what's the opportunity? What's the size of the opportunity, and what would we have to do to really capitalize on that?
So does this all hinge on this Paris deal going forward, or are you just talking about doing green, sustainable finance stuff immaterial of what happens with these sort of government plans?
Well, that's actually a really interesting point, and I've had some interesting conversations on that topic lately. Like, do you wait for government to lead on these things, or as a private sector, do you move ahead? And I would argue that we need to move ahead in the private sector, because governments will change. Policies will change. Certainly, it can be very helpful if we can have consistency in policy and government to guide things. There is no doubt about that. But I think there's a recognition in the private sector that we need to do something about this, and that we need to think longer term. And you're seeing the financial sector already do lots of good things in the area of sustainable finance. You've got, think about green bonds, for instance. We actually, in Canada, were the first insurance company to issue a green bond. That was Manulife. The first pension fund to issue a green bond, Canadian pension plan. Globally, I'm talking, not just in Canada. TD has been active. We've got people stepping up. We've got our financial community very committed to creating better disclosure so that investors know what they're investing in. They know the risk. I want to understand when I make an investment, and I think most investors do, what really is the risk around climate that might exist in the different things that we're looking at. Or if I want to do good with my investments and hopefully be contributing to companies that are thinking more sustainably and making investments in that area, is that disclosed? And do I really know that can I measure what they're doing, or can I be assured that they actually are doing the things that they're saying that they're doing if I'm investing? So, we're seeing people step up and recognize that, number one, we need to be doing this. We need to be thinking about the transition. If you're a pension fund or an insurance company with a 7-year horizon on your investments, you need to think about what the world looks like 7 years from now. So certainly, I think the Paris Accord really mobilized action around the world on this topic. But I think, we need to do it anyways, even outside of any commitments we made there. There's a recognition we need to move on this. And there's a recognition there's an opportunity. It's just not all about, let's think about all the costs. Let's think about what, a global transition in the industrial world is going to look like, and what's the opportunity.
And Jennifer, I appreciate all of that. I hear from a lot of listeners and my readers in the Sun papers that they're a little skeptical of the Paris stuff only because it's so kind of overreaching and you've got these big government tentacles and everywhere. You know, the carbon tax is kind of losing public support. People aren't too crazy about all of that. The money sort of being recycled. I know we're told we're going to be better off for it, but there's some skepticism for that. But then when you talk about businesses or banks basically just putting their money where their mouth is, maybe a company says, hey, I'm going to build a better mousetrap and it's going to be more environmentally friendly, and you go, okay, we're gonna invest in that, both maybe because we think it's the right thing to do and because we're going to get a long-term return on it. I see that latter stuff having perhaps much greater long-term traction for your industry and the people supporting it. Do you guys see that happening as well?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, there has to be a business case. And don't get me wrong, I mean, climate change is real. We're seeing the results of that all around the world. We even see that in Canada. And it matters to everyone. Like, think about just something as simple as getting flood insurance for your basement. Like, soon that, and in many places actually in Canada, you can't get that, or it's exceedingly expensive because of the effects of climate change. So this will be on everybody's doorstep if it isn't already. And so we do need to be thinking about that. And so I think it's better to get ahead of this and to create a plan, and hopefully a national plan around what we should do to take advantage of it, as opposed to being the last person in and just lagging on these fronts. I think the reality is we have a very, we're a resource economy to a great degree. We are a carbon intensive economy, and we need to think about that. And I'm certainly not suggesting that everyone runs out and sells all their oil and gas stocks, because the reality is we're going to have an orderly transition in our economy. But we need to start thinking about it now, because it won't happen overnight. It's not going to happen next year. It's going to happen 3 years from now. This is, a 10, 15-year transition in terms of figuring out how we get to, lower carbon emissions, how we figure out that we have infrastructure which is more sustainable. And we need to think about, it's not just about lower carbon emissions. It's also about just making sure that, we have the infrastructure for the 21st century. And I think we would all agree we probably don't have that today. We have a ways to go there.
All right, Jennifer Reynolds, President and CEO of Toronto Finance International. Thanks for joining us today. Have a good one.
Thank you. You too.